Respected, the moment he let you walk away, he thought silence would make him stronger, distance would make him feel free, and time would erase your memory. But what he never expected was this: the woman he once took for granted would become the very thought keeping him awake at night. Because sometimes the person you lose does not disappear from your heart, they become the truth you can no longer escape. There is something painful about being the one who walks away after giving everything you had. You did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because staying started breaking something inside you. And if you are listening to me right now, maybe you know exactly what I mean. Maybe you know what it feels like to love somebody with your whole heart while watching them slowly stop showing up for you. Maybe you know what it feels like to beg for effort without ever using words, to cry in silence while pretending everything is fine, to keep hoping somebody will finally realize you are worth before it is too late. See, people think walking away is easy. They think the one who leaves is always the stronger one, the colder one, the one who stopped loving first. But the truth is, sometimes the person who walks away is the one who loved the hardest. Sometimes leaving is not about giving up. Sometimes leaving is about finally choosing yourself after spending too much time choosing somebody who never fully chose you. And here is where many people get confused. They think the moment you leave, he forgets about you. They imagine him moving on without care, laughing without regret, sleeping peacefully, while you carry the weight of heartbreak alone. But life has a strange way of teaching lessons, and one lesson many people learn too late is this: you never truly understand the value of something until it is gone. You see, when you were there, he got comfortable with your patience, comfortable with your love, comfortable with your forgiveness. He started belying. Your presence was permanent, and human beings have a dangerous habit of taking permanent things for granted. It is like air. Nobody notices air until they cannot breathe. You answered the calls. You checked if he made it home safely. You remembered little details nobody else cared enough to notice. You stood beside him through confusion, insecurity, and moments when even he did not believe in himself. You gave emotional support, loyalty, understanding. But because you were always there, he stopped seeing your value clearly. That is not because you lacked worth. It is because familiarity sometimes blinds people. Let me tell you something important. There are moments in life when a man mistakes peace for boredom. He mistakes consistency for something ordinary. He mistakes loyalty for weakness. And sometimes he convinces himself that he has all the time in the world to fix things later. But later has a cruel way of arriving after everything is already gone. The day you walked away may have looked ordinary from the outside. Maybe there was no dramatic ending, no screaming, no movie scene where somebody runs through the rain begging you to stay. Maybe it happened quietly. Quiet heartbreak, quiet disappointment, quiet exhaustion. Sometimes a woman leaves emotionally long before she leaves physically. She starts noticing how tired she feels, tired of over-explaining herself, tired of asking for bare minimum effort, tired of carrying emotional weight alone. And one day, something shifts inside her. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. And clarity changes everything. Because once somebody realizes they deserve peace more than confusion, something powerful happens. They stop chasing explanations. They stop begging for attention. They stop shrinking themselves just to keep another person comfortable. Now hear me carefully. The moment you stopped reaching out, something changed for him too. At first, maybe he enjoyed the silence. Maybe he thought, she will see. Her own back, she always does. Maybe he expected another message, another apology, another attempt from you to fix what he kept breaking. But when that message never came, reality slowly started knocking at his door. And reality has a voice nobody can ignore forever. He notices mornings feel different. Nobody checking in. Nobody asking how his day went. Nobody quietly rooting for him in ways he never appreciated enough. Suddenly, the emotional safety net he depended on without realizing it is gone. People do not always miss love immediately. Sometimes they miss convenience first. And then slowly, painfully, they begin to understand what they truly lost. He starts replaying memories. Funny thing about memory is this: it rarely reminds us of people at their worst. It reminds us of warmth, familiarity, the laughter, the kindness. The moments we ignored because we thought there would always be more. Suddenly he remembers your voice. He remembers the way you encouraged him when life went hard. He remembers the small sacrifices you made without asking for recognition. And what hurts the most is realizing he did not value those things when he had them. Now, maybe somebody listening right now needs to hear this truth. Closure does not always come from another person apologizing. Sometimes closure comes when life finally reveals what your absence meant, because people can ignore your words. They can ignore your tears. But absence speaks louder than anything. When you are gone, there is no distraction from truth anymore. And this is where regret quietly begins. Regret is not loud at first. It starts small. Maybe he sees something that reminds him of you, a song, a place, a memory. Maybe somebody says something kind and suddenly he remembers the kindness he stopped noticing in you. Then the questions begin. Did I lose somebody real? Was she actually different? Did I ruin something good? And those questions are dangerous because they arrive at night when the world gets quiet. See, daytime gives people distractions. Nighttime gives people truth. At night, there are no loud conversations, no social media pretending, no busy schedules to hide behind, just thoughts. And thoughts have a way of exposing what pride tries to bury. This is the part many women never see. They imagine the man who let them go moved on effortlessly. But what they often do not understand is that regret grows in silence, especially when he sees you doing something he never expected. Healing, growing, smiling again, choosing yourself. Because nothing forces somebody to confront their mistakes more than watching the person they underestimated become stronger without them. See, pain changes people. Some pain destroys people, but some pain transforms them. And maybe the hardest thing for him is realizing the woman he thought would always wait finally stopped waiting. That changes everything, because now he understands something he ignores. Build the ed before love is not guaranteed. Good people are not guaranteed. Loyalty is not guaranteed. And once somebody reaches emotional peace without you, getting them back becomes harder than losing them ever was. But let me tell you something even deeper. This story is not only about him thinking about you, it is also about you remembering your value, because too many people spend years waiting for somebody else to realize their worth while forgetting to recognize it themselves. You were never supposed to beg somebody to see what you bring into their life. Real love does not make you constantly question your value. Real love protects your spirit. Real love respects your heart. Real love does not leave you starving for consistency. And maybe, just maybe, walking away was not your loss. Maybe it was the beginning of your growth. Maybe the pain you felt was preparing you for a version of yourself stronger than before. Because there is power in surviving heartbreak. There is the wisdom in disappointment. And there is something beautiful about becoming the person you needed when nobody else showed up. Now imagine this. He is sitting alone somewhere, maybe pretending everything is okay, but deep inside something feels different. He cannot explain why your memory keeps returning, why your absence feels heavier now than your presence ever did, why suddenly every relationship feels temporary compared to what he had with you. And that is when truth finally arrives. Not the truth he wanted, the truth he avoided, the truth that says, sometimes you lose the best thing that ever happened to you because you were too immature to recognize its value. And by the time you understand it, they are already gone. There comes a moment in almost every person's life when reality stops whispering and starts speaking loud enough to shake the soul. For him, that moment did not happen the day you walked away. Truth rarely arrives that quickly. At first, pride stood in the way. Pride has a funny way of convincing people they are fine when their heart is quietly falling apart. He told himself stories. She'll come back. She just needs time. It's not that serious. And maybe for a little while those lies felt comforting. Maybe he distracted himself with work, friends, noise, or attention from people who were never really meant to stay. Maybe he laughed louder than usual just to prove he was unaffected. Maybe he convinced everybody around him that losing you meant nothing. But life has a strange way of removing distractions. Eventually, the quiet arrives. And quiet has a way of introducing us to ourselves. Because when the messages stop coming, when your name disappears from notifications, when your voice no longer fills the spaces it once occupied, something shifts. The silence starts feeling heavy. Not peaceful, heavy. See, there is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Solitude teaches you about yourself. Loneliness reminds you of what you neglected. And suddenly, the very silence he once welcomed becomes unbearable. He starts noticing the little things. Nobody asks if he ate. Nobody checks if he got home safely. Nobody notices when he sounds tired. Nobody remembers the tiny details about his life the way you did. And here is the truth many people never say out loud. People often underestimate emotional support until they no longer have it. When somebody genuinely cares for you, they become part of the rhythm of your life. You stop noticing the effort because it feels normal. Their kindness becomes expected. Their loyalty becomes routine. But once it disappears, even ordinary days begin to feel unfamiliar. Maybe he walks past a place you once visited together. Suddenly a memory sneaks in without permission. You're laughing, you talking, you dreaming about a future that once felt possible. Funny thing about memories, they don't knock before entering. And no matter how hard someone tries, certain people leave fingerprints on the heart. That is what happens when somebody loves deeply. They leave traces. You cannot erase real connection like deleting pictures from a phone, because emotional memories live somewhere deeper. And this is where regret begins growing roots. Not because he suddenly became a bad person realizing he made mistakes. Human beings are flawed. Sometimes people hurt the very person they care about simply because they are emotionally immature. Sometimes they confuse love with control. Sometimes they think effort can wait until tomorrow. But tomorrow does not always arrive the way we expect. You know what hurts him the most? It is not only missing you. It is realizing how many chances he had to love you better. That feeling is heavy because hindsight is painful. Hindsight makes people replay moments they once ignored. He remembers arguments differently now. At the time, maybe he thought you were overreacting. Maybe he thought your needs were too much. Maybe he dismissed your tears because he assumed you would eventually get over it. But distance has a funny way of creating perspective. Now he starts hearing your words differently. Suddenly he understands that you were not asking for too much. You were asking for consistency, for effort, for reassurance, for partnership. You were asking to feel loved in a relationship where you felt increasingly alone. And when somebody realizes they misunderstood a good person, regret becomes unavoidable. See, there is a dangerous assumption many people make in relationships. They believe loyalty has no expiration date. They think somebody will keep forgiving forever, keep waiting forever, keep hoping forever. But even the strongest hearts grow tired. Even the deepest love eventually gets exhausted when it is constantly neglected. A woman who truly loves does not leave quickly. That is something people fail to understand. She stays. She explains. She forgives. She PS. She gives second chances, third chances, sometimes more than she should. She fights for the relationship long after people think she should have walked away. So when she finally leaves, it is rarely impulsive. It is heartbreak mixed with acceptance. It is disappointment mixed with exhaustion. And deep down, part of him starts realizing this truth. She really loved me. That realization can haunt somebody. Because real love is rare. Attention is common. Attraction is common. Temporary excitement is common. But somebody who genuinely stands beside you, supports you, believes in you even during your worst moments, that kind of love changes a person. And once it is gone, everything else starts feeling temporary. Maybe he starts dating again. Maybe he talks to new people. Maybe he tries convincing himself he has moved on. But comparison becomes impossible to avoid. Because now he notices things he once overlooked. He notices how rare your patience was, how genuine your care was, how much emotional safety you provided. And suddenly people who once seemed exciting feel shallow. Not because they are bad people, but because what he had with you carried depth. You ever notice how some lessons only make sense after loss? Life works that way. Some wisdom arrives wrapped in heartbreak. And while he is sitting there trying to make sense of why your memory keeps showing up, something else begins happening. He notices you changing, maybe through social media, maybe through mutual friends, maybe just through silence. You seem calmer, stronger, more focused. You are no longer chasing answers, no longer begging to be understood. And that can be confusing for somebody who expected you to remain emotionally available forever. Because he thought your love meant permanence. He thought your patience had no limits. He thought he had more time. But growth changes people, and healing changes energy. There is something powerful about a woman, and who stops seeking validation from the very person who failed to appreciate her. That strength is unforgettable, because now, instead of seeing somebody broken, he sees somebody evolving. And evolution creates distance, the kind of distance pride cannot fix. Now hear this carefully, because somebody listening needs this reminder. Do not confuse his regret with your responsibility. Just because somebody finally realizes your value does not mean you owe them access to you again. That part matters. Because too many people spend years waiting for apologies instead of building peace. And peace is precious. You cannot keep reopening old wounds hoping somebody finally understands what they should have valued from the beginning. Sometimes growth means accepting the lesson without reopening the chapter. And that truth is difficult, especially when love was real. Because love leaves echoes, even after goodbye. Sometimes you miss them. Sometimes memories hit unexpectedly. The times healing feels slow. But growth is not about pretending you never cared. Growth is learning to care without abandoning yourself. That is maturity. And somewhere while you are rebuilding your confidence, finding pieces of yourself again, rediscovering joy in places heartbreak once touched, he sits with thoughts he cannot silence. He wonders things he never wondered before. What if I had tried harder? What if I had listened? What if she was the best thing I ever had? Those questions do not disappear easily, Because regret has a way of revisiting people, especially when they realize love was available, but they were too distracted, too immature, or too emotionally unavailable to protect it. And here is the painful truth. Sometimes somebody learns your value only after they lose access to you. Not because you changed, but because absence removed the illusion that you would always stay. Now he sees what life feels like without your presence. And suddenly all that. Moments he ignored become impossible to forget. The good mornings, the check-ins, the emotional support, the patience, the quiet love that asked for so little and gave so much. He sees it now. But seeing something late does not always mean getting it back. And maybe that is the lesson life needed him to learn. That love is not something you gamble with. That hearts are not endless. That people eventually stop bleeding for relationships that never heal them. And maybe somebody listening right now needs this reminder too. Walking away did not make you weak. It made you brave. Because sometimes courage looks like leaving what hurts you even when love still exists. Sometimes courage means choosing peace over potential. Sometimes courage means accepting that somebody can care about you and still fail to love you correctly. That truth hurts, but truth also heals. And maybe one day he will finally understand this completely. You did not leave because you stopped loving him. You left because loving him started costing you too much of yourself. There is a kind of pain people do not talk about enough. The pain of realizing too late. Not when things are broken beyond repair, not when arguments are still happening, not when someone is begging for another chance. No, the deepest kind of regret comes later. When the house gets quiet, when life slows down, and when a person finally has enough silence to hear the truth they spent months avoiding, and for him, that truth keeps returning. Because something changed the moment you stopped chasing. See, people rarely notice how much emotional energy someone brings into their life until it disappears. While you were there, he had somebody to lean on. Somebody who listened when life became difficult. Somebody who carried emotional weight with him even when he did not deserve that kind of patience. You loved him in ways he probably never fully understood. And that is what hurts now. Not just losing you. Realizing how deeply you cared after the door already closed. Life has a way of humbling people, sometimes through failure, sometimes through loneliness, and sometimes through heartbreak they created themselves. Maybe he remembers moments differently now. Funny how time changes perspective. At one point, maybe he thought you were dramatic when you expressed pain. Maybe he thought you were too emotional, too sensitive, asking for too much reassurance. But growth has a strange habit of making old memories feel different. Now he hears those same conversations in his mind and realizes something painful. You were never asking for perfection. You were asking for effort. You were asking him to notice, to care, to stop making you feel invisible in a relationship where your heart was screaming for connection. You know what happens when somebody loses a person who genuinely loved them. The world starts feeling colder, not immediately. At first, distractions make everything manageable. Friends, parties, work, temporary excitement. People are good at pretending they are okay, but pretending gets exhausting. Eventually, emotions collect interest, and everything avoided comes back. That is when the memories become louder. He starts remembering random things at unexpected times. The way you laughed over something silly. The way you remember details nobody else noticed. The comfort of your presence after hard days. The emotional safety of simply knowing somebody cared. And here is the truth about emotional connection. You cannot replace it overnight. Real connection is built slowly. It takes trust, time, vulnerability, shared pain, shared joy, late night conversations, forgiveness, growth. You cannot duplicate that instantly with somebody new. That is why people often feel emptier after losing somebody meaningful than they expected. Because they did not only lose a person, they lost familiarity, comfort, history, support, and soothe. Deeply, life feels different in ways words struggle to explain. Maybe he catches himself reaching for his phone before remembering there is nobody to text anymore. Maybe certain songs suddenly feel painful. Maybe certain places feel heavier. Maybe he keeps wondering why your absence feels bigger than he expected. Because losing somebody who truly loved you creates a space nothing temporary can easily fill. And maybe for the first time in a long time, he starts questioning himself honestly. That part matters. Because self-reflection often arrives through pain. He starts asking difficult questions. Why did I take her for granted? Why did I stop trying? Why was I emotionally unavailable when she needed me most? Why did I think she would always stay? Those questions can break a person open because growth begins where excuses end. And maybe for the first time, he sees his own mistakes clearly, not through defensive, not through pride, through truth. That can be uncomfortable Truth says maybe you were tired because you carried too much emotional responsibility alone. Truth says maybe your sadness came from feeling unseen. Truth says maybe you gave more chances than people realized. Truth says maybe you stayed longer than your heart could handle. That realization changes people because now he understands something he once ignored. Losing you was not random. It was consequences. And consequences teach lessons ego refuses to hear. But while he wrestles with regret, something else is happening in your life. You are changing too. Slowly, quietly. At first, healing probably felt impossible. Maybe mornings felt heavy. Maybe memories hurt. Maybe you question yourself, question your worth, question whether leaving was the right decision. That happens. Heartbreak makes people doubt themselves, especially people with good hearts. Because loving deeply often means grieving deeply. But healing is strange. It starts. The small, one peaceful morning. One moment where you laugh unexpectedly. One day where the pain feels lighter. One evening where you realize you are no longer checking your phone, hoping things change. And little by little, you begin finding yourself again. That process matters. Because somewhere in loving him, maybe you forgot pieces of yourself. Maybe you became smaller trying to make the relationship work. Maybe you abandoned your own needs to keep peace. Maybe you lost confidence while constantly questioning whether you were enough. But healing begins returning people to themselves. And there is something powerful about a woman rediscovering her worth. Powerful, unforgettable, because confidence built through heartbreak carries wisdom. Now imagine this for a moment. He notices the difference, not just physically, emotionally. Your energy changed. You are no longer chasing, no longer trying to convince somebody to value you, no longer over-explaining yourself. And something about that unsettles him, because people expect access to the version of you they once knew. But growth changes access. Growth creates boundaries. Growth teaches people not to settle for half-hearted effort anymore. And suddenly he realizes something difficult. The woman he thought would always be available has learned how to live without him. That truth can hit hard, because there is nothing more humbling than realizing somebody you underestimated finally stopped waiting. See, many people misunderstand what strength looks like. Strength is not pretending you never cared. Strength is caring deeply and still walking away when staying destroys your peace. Strength is loving somebody while accepting they are not loving you the way you deserve. Strength is grieving and healing at the same time. And if nobody told you this lately, hear me carefully. Walking away did not mean you failed. Sometimes relationships end not because love disappears, but because effort disappears, because emotional maturity disappears, because respect disappears. Love alone cannot carry a relationship forever. Two people have to protect it. Two people have to nurture it. Two people have to grow. And when one person keeps sacrificing while the other keeps becoming comfortable, imbalance eventually breaks everything. Now, maybe he wants another chance. Maybe regret finally opened his eyes. Maybe he genuinely misses you. That happens. Sometimes loss teaches people lessons nothing else could. But here's the truth most people avoid. Missing somebody does not automatically mean they are ready to love differently. Regret and growth are not always the same thing. An apology without changed behavior is only temporary comfort. And somebody listening right now needs to understand this. Do not let loneliness rewrite history. Do not romanticize the pain just because somebody finally noticed your absence. Remember what made you leave. Remember the nights you see off. The wide silently. Remember the conversations that never changed anything. Remember how lonely love felt when you were standing beside somebody emotionally unavailable. Because healing sometimes requires honesty, not fantasy. And maybe this whole story was never only about him losing you. Maybe it was about you finding yourself, finding standards, finding self-respect, finding the courage to stop settling for less than what your heart truly deserves. Because the truth is this. Sometimes the greatest thing that happens after heartbreak is not reconciliation. Sometimes the greatest thing is transformation. And maybe the hardest lesson he will ever learn is realizing this. The woman he let walk away did not disappear. She evolved.